Most parents eventually encounter a moment that feels surprisingly small on the surface, yet carries a disproportionate emotional weight. A moment where a child looks directly at them and says a simple no, and while the word itself is brief and uncomplicated, the reaction it triggers is often anything but simple, because it touches on expectations, authority, respect, and the underlying structure of the relationship between parent and child. At an early stage of development, the word no is not primarily an act of rebellion, but rather an expression of emerging autonomy. Because as children begin to recognize themselves as separate individuals, they naturally test boundaries to understand where their influence begins and ends. And this process is not only expected, but necessary for developing a sense of self that is distinct from external control. When a child says no, they are often experimenting with agency, exploring the idea that their choices can shape outcomes. And while this can sometimes conflict with immediate parental goals, it also represents a foundational step in learning how to navigate decision-making, negotiation, and personal boundaries, which are essential skills later in life. The difficulty arises because the same behavior that signals healthy development can also disrupt routines, create delays, and challenge authority, which places parents in a position where they must respond not only to the behavior itself, but to what it represents. And in many cases, the response is shaped by a desire to maintain order, efficiency, and respect within the household. This often leads to a pattern where the word no is met with immediate correction, redirection, or consequence, which can be effective in the short term for achieving compliance, yet over time, the consistency of this response can influence how the child interprets their own ability to express disagreement, gradually associating the act of saying no with negative outcomes rather than as a neutral part of communication. Children are highly sensitive to patterns, and they learn not only from individual interactions, but from the accumulation of responses over time. So when expressions of refusal are consistently discouraged or overridden, the child may begin to reduce their use of no, not necessarily because they no longer feel resistance, but because they have learned that expressing it is not productive. This adaptation can appear as improved behavior, because the child becomes more cooperative and less oppositional. Yet beneath that surface, an important skill may be underdeveloped, specifically the ability to assert boundaries and communicate limits in a clear and confident way, which becomes increasingly relevant as the child grows older and encounters more complex social situations. There is also a distinction between the tone and context in which no is expressed, because not all refusals are the same, and children often experiment with different ways of saying it, ranging from impulsive reactions to more deliberate forms of resistance. And how these variations are received can shape the child's understanding of acceptable communication. When parents respond primarily to the presence of refusal, rather than the manner in which it is expressed, the child may not receive guidance on how to refine their communication, which means that even when they attempt to express disagreement in a more regulated way, the response may remain the same, reinforcing the idea that the content itself is the issue rather than the delivery. This can lead to a form of internal conflict, where the child recognizes a need to express themselves, but lacks a clear model for how to do so effectively, resulting in either suppression of the response or escalation when the internal pressure becomes too strong, both of which are less adaptive than a balanced approach. A more nuanced response involves distinguishing between the boundary being set by the parent and the expression coming from the child, where the parent maintains the necessary limit while still acknowledging the child's attempt to assert themselves, which allows both structure and autonomy to exist simultaneously. For example, a child refusing a request can be met with a consistent boundary, while also recognizing the feeling or intention behind the refusal. And this dual response communicates that while not all choices are available, the act of expressing a preference or resistance is still valid, which helps preserve the child's sense of agency. Over time, this approach encourages children to move from simple refusals toward more complex forms of communication, where instead of a flat no, they begin to explain their reasoning, negotiate alternatives, or ask questions, all of which contribute to more effective interaction and mutual understanding. It is also important to consider that children often mirror the communication patterns they experience. So when they are given space to express disagreement respectfully, they are more likely to adopt similar patterns in their interactions with others, which supports the development of social competence and conflict resolution skills. In contrast, when refusal is consistently suppressed, children may either become overly compliant or may reserve their resistance for situations where the stakes feel higher, which can lead to more intense expressions of defiance because the skill of gradual, low-stakes disagreement has not been practiced. The balance, then, is not in eliminating the word no, but in shaping how it is used and understood, where it becomes part of a broader communication system rather than a trigger for immediate conflict. And this requires a level of consistency and awareness that may not always feel efficient in the moment, but tends to produce more stable patterns over time. There are also contextual factors to consider, because not every situation allows for extended negotiation, and there are moments where immediate compliance is necessary for safety or practicality. And in these cases, clarity and firmness are appropriate. Yet even within these moments, the way the response is delivered can still model respect and structure without dismissing the child's perspective entirely. As children grow, the ability to say no evolves from simple refusal into a more sophisticated form of boundary setting, where they learn to evaluate situations, consider consequences, and decide when it is appropriate to assert themselves. And this progression depends on having had opportunities to practice in earlier stages. If those opportunities are limited, the development of this skill may be delayed, which can become more noticeable in environments that require independent thinking, such as peer relationships, academic challenges, or later professional settings, where the ability to advocate for oneself is closely tied to confidence and clarity. It is also worth noting that the discomfort parents feel in response to no is not arbitrary, because it often reflects legitimate concerns about respect, cooperation, and long-term behavior. Yet the challenge lies in separating the immediate inconvenience from the broader developmental process, which requires a shift in perspective from control to guidance. This shift does not remove authority, but rather reframes it, where authority is used to create structure while still allowing room for the child to engage with that structure, test it, and gradually internalize it, which leads to a more sustainable form of self-regulation. In practice, this means that the presence of no in a child's vocabulary is not necessarily a problem to be eliminated, but a signal to be interpreted, providing insight into how the child is processing their environment and their place within it. And when approached with this understanding, it becomes less of a disruption and more of an opportunity to support development in a deliberate way. Ultimately, the goal is not to raise a child who never resists, but one who knows how to resist appropriately, who can express disagreement without losing connection, and who understands both the limits set by others and the boundaries they are allowed to set for themselves, which creates a more balanced and functional approach to interaction over time. When this balance is present, the word no loses its intensity as a point of conflict and becomes integrated into everyday communication, serving as one of many tools the child uses to navigate relationships, make decisions, and maintain a sense of autonomy within the structures that guide them.